If you're looking for cheap, safe, and reliable MT, make sure you go check out my new sponsor, safembamt.com. Use code JC2K for 5% off and go build that God Squad you always wanted. Yo, what is good, YouTube, and welcome back to another JC2K video. In today's video, I am going to be doing my mock draft for the lottery of the 2021 NBA draft. I'm excited to watch the draft, very excited to see where a lot of these guys go. I will be completely honest, outside of the top probably, I don't know, maybe 10 of the top prospects, maybe even not the top 10, but 10 of the top prospects. I'm not like the most informed on the depth of the draft, except for guys who are Big 12 guys, because I'm a Big 12 fan. For those of you who don't know, my cousin actually plays for Baylor. His name's Matthew Meyer, if you want to look him up. But so for that reason, I'm a huge Baylor fan. So I know a ton about Davion Mitchell, Jared Butler, guys like that, guys from the Big 12 like Cade Cunningham. But some of the other positions and deeper players in the draft I'm not quite as knowledgeable on, which I will admit just from the start, I am not the most knowledgeable about all of those guys. So before we hop into it, I just want to let y'all know that. Also, if y'all haven't, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you enjoy this NBA content, if y'all enjoy my 2K content as well, I would appreciate the support. And yeah, without further ado, let's hop into it and talk about what I think is going to happen in the NBA draft. So for the first pick, I think it's pretty clear. When you look at the Pistons and you look at the guys who are going to be available for them, assuming that they keep their pick, which I'm assuming that every team is going to keep their pick. I'm obviously not going to make any trades because I don't know what happened. I think there's a good chance that a team like the Thunder tries to trade up. And I've actually heard rumors they were trying to trade for the first pick, but the Pistons turned them down for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and the sixth pick, which I thought was interesting. But definitely think that the Pistons will keep their pick, and I'm assuming every team will keep their pick. And the Pistons, looking at their current roster and the guys who are available, I really feel like Cade Cunningham is a no-brainer pick. They have a guy in Jeremy Grant who's a good, solid wing, capable of doing a lot of things. Some good bigs in Mason Plumlee, Isaiah Stewart. They got young talent in a guy like Killian Hayes. The thing about them is, while it does say that the shooting guard position is their biggest need, which I would agree, you got a guy in Killian Hayes who has decent size, and Cade also is 6'8", which is going to help a lot on the defensive end of the court. And I just think Cade Cunningham is a gimme here. He's one of the best prospects we've seen in years. Best prospects since Zion for sure. I would say he's definitely a top 5 prospect this decade, probably since 2000. Honestly, he is that good of a prospect, a type of guy who I think will wind up being a perennial all-star, probably a likely top 10 player in the league at his peak, maybe even higher than that. I could see him becoming an MVP contender. He's a above average defender. He's an elite passer. He's got great size. He scores effectively at all 3 levels. He's a great finisher. He has a post game. He has a mid range. He can shoot the 3. He can take defenders off the dribble. He's so capable across the board. One of the most NBA ready, I think, prospects and just talented guys overall that we've seen in years. And I think that this is really a no-brainer for them. They draft him. They plug him at the point guard, slide Killian Hayes to the shooting guard, hope that they can work together and figure it out. You build around Cade Cunningham because he is that good. I mean, I think it's that simple. I mean, I've heard they're considering guys like Evan Mobley and Jalen Green, but I don't think that this is a pick that they can mess up. If you don't pick Cade Cunningham here, I don't know. I think any team who had the number 1 pick would have picked Cade Cunningham, and the Pistons are no different. So at number 1, I do have the Pistons going Cade Cunningham. At number 2, we have the Houston Rockets, and looking at the Rockets, there are a couple different ways I think they could go with this pick. You have John Wall, who's under contract for the next 3 years, but he is kind of getting older, was very inefficient last year, and I think part of that was because he was kind of shot checking on a bad team, especially with Christian Wood out. But you have a guy in Christian Wood who has a lot of talent, likely to be an all-star level player for the next few years. They have a couple other young pieces, a guy like Kevin Porter, who really came on and played well toward the end of this season. He's the type of guy who I think can be a primary ball handler. He can play off the ball. He's an elite slasher, a good defender. He needs to improve his 3-point shot a little bit, but if he does that, he's going to become a very good point guard or shooting guard option. I think they have some other talent, guys like Jayshawn Tate, Kenyon Martin, who showed some flashes, Sterling Brown when he was healthy, even an older Eric Gordon who can still score the ball. So they have talent, and for me personally, looking at their team, I just think that it's very hard here. The question is, do you want a guy who can be a ball handler in potentially Jalen Green or Jalen Suggs, or do you want a guy in Evan Mobley who can become potentially a stretch big, has a lot of talent? Evan Mobley is a very good all-around player. I think he's very capable of doing everything. I think he could become a very good all-around big man. He's a great athlete. He moves his feet well. He's a really good all-around player. Has the potential, I think, to become an all-star level center. Just if he improves his rebounding a little bit more physicality, that will help him. But for me personally, I think Evan Mobley is probably the pick to make here. I personally think he's the second best player in the draft, and I think he would fit very well for the Houston Rockets. So for number 2, I am going to take Evan Mobley for the Houston Rockets. At number 3, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the Cavaliers are a team that there are a lot of question marks around right now, because you got a guy like Kevin Love, who's still a very solid NBA player, but he clearly has no interest, it seems like, in being in Cleveland. And then you have some other pieces around him. You have Darius Garland, who played a lot better this year. You have Colin Sexton, who had a really solid year. Jared Allen's a great defensive big. Isaac Okoro shows potential on the defensive end. If he can figure it out on offense, I think he can be a solid NBA player as well. And I mean, looking at their team, that's about as far as it goes in terms of talent for the future, I think. But that being said, the question with them is, are they going to trade Colin Sexton? Because that's been a big rumor. Is that something they consider doing? Would they consider trading down? I could see them trading down with a team like the Thunder, who clearly seems like they want to trade up and get a talented guy in the top few picks of the draft. But assuming that they keep their pick and they keep their roster the same, which would assume that they keep Darius Garland, they keep Colin Sexton in their backcourt, this becomes a tough pick for them. And I feel like fit-wise, looking at their squad, I think the best fit for the Cavaliers right now would be a guy like Scotty Barnes. Scotty Barnes is incredibly athletic. He's an elite defender. He handles the ball very well for a 6'9" guy. He can handle the ball like a guard. There's comparisons between Scotty Barnes to Ben Simmons, and I think there's good reason for that. And as poor as Ben Simmons was in the playoffs, Ben Simmons is an exceptional defender, one of the best defensive players in the league, a great distributor, ball handler. Just inability to shoot the ball holds him back, and that's really was the issue with Scotty Barnes in college as well, as his inability to shoot. But I do think if he develops a jump shot, he will be a very good all-around player, and I think he fits perfectly, or he will be able to fit well as at small forward position as a guy who can attack off the dribble, hopefully develop a jump shot and be an elite defender, which is something that the Cavs definitely need, especially considering their small backcourt with Darius Garland and Colin Sexton. So for me personally, I think Scotty Barnes right now is probably the best fit for the Cavs. So I think at 3, assuming things stay the same, they would go the direction of Scotty Barnes, assuming they don't trade one of their guards. If they trade one of their guards, that changes everything. They could pick Jalen Green, pick Jalen Suggs, but assuming they stick with their team the way it is right now, I think Scotty Barnes will be the best fit for the Cavs and the guy they pick at number 3. At number 4, we have the Raptors. Who the thing about the Raptors is, are they going to trade Siakam? Because Siakam has made it, there are a lot of rumors about him wanting out. And then you have a guy like Kyle Lowry, who is a free agent, I believe. Fred VanVleet has a lot of talent. They have him under contract for the next few years. Very good player all around. They have Chris Boucher, OG Anunoby, Gary Trent, even some guys like Kim Birch, Freddie Gillespie, Jalen Harris. Although Jalen Harris didn't he just get suspended for a year? Not honestly sure what happened there. But they have some talent on this team. Guys who have shown flashes. They're a good defensive squad. And I think, assuming that they don't bring Kyle Lowry back, which I think there's a very good chance that Lowry attempts to go to more of a championship contending team like the Lakers, they would probably be looking to pick up another guard for the future. And at that point, I think the question becomes Jalen Green or Jalen Suggs. And for me personally, having watched a lot of Gonzaga, because Gonzaga was Baylor's biggest rival this year, I watched a lot of Gonzaga games. And I feel like Jalen Suggs, as solid of an all-around player he is, I think people are overrating him just a little bit at times, although he's not being talked about quite as much recently. I don't see him becoming a better prospect than Jalen Green. Jalen Green strikes me as your prototypical 3-level scorer, a guy who, while he may not have the best size of the shooting guard position, can handle the ball, can shoot the ball, can finish, can be a great athlete, can be a very good shooting guard for a long time in the NBA. And I think he would fit very nicely next to Fred VanVleet, attempting to build their backcourt for the future. A guy who I think can pair well with Siakam if he decides to stay, pairs well with OG Anunoby, Chris Boucher, and gives them a talented young core that they can really grow around and build with and attempt to win with in the future. So for me personally, I think Jalen Green would be the right pick for them at number 4. At number 5, you have the Orlando Magic. And I've heard rumors about the Magic being interested in a guy like James Bouknight. I don't know if I pronounced his name right, but the UConn guard, he really has, he's a guy who kind of, I feel like, came out of nowhere within the last few years. I'll be honest, I don't know a ton about him. I didn't watch a lot of UConn games this year. I know he's a talented offensive player. And I'm interested to see what happens with him, because there's been a lot of hype around him recently, but I'd be lying if I said I've watched a lot of his tape, so I don't know a ton about him. But from what I've heard, he sounds like a guy they'd be interested in. Jalen Suggs is another guy who I expect that they would be interested in. But the question with them is, do you want to draft a guard when you have Markelle Fultz coming back off of injury, Jonathan Isaac coming back off of injury, Gary Harris is still there, Terrence Ross is still there as kind of a sixth man. You got a guy like Wendell Carter Jr. They have some talent, even RJ Hampton, Cole Anthony. I completely forgot about Cole Anthony. They have a lot of young guards. They have guys like Markelle Fultz and Cole Anthony who at that point guard position. So for me personally, I think that the best pick for the Magic would be a guy like Jonathan Kuminga. I think Jonathan Kuminga could really develop into a really good all-around scorer. He's raw. He needs to develop, but the Magic are in a position where they're likely not going to be good next year. They're likely not going to be good the year after that. They've clearly thrown themselves into a rebuild by trading a lot of their top guys like Vucevic last year, and I think picking a guy like Kuminga, who will hopefully have time to develop with the Magic, would potentially set them up to have a more well-rounded roster in a couple years where they're attempting to compete. And if he can develop a more consistent jump shot and become a more consistent and efficient offensive player, that will really help him a lot and help the Magic into hopefully developing him into a stud wing. And so for me personally, this is kind of an off-the-wall pick, but if I'm the Magic, I'm probably picking Jonathan Kuminga at number 5 right now, because I'm not super high on Jalen Suggs, and I don't think Bo Knight is the pick right now for them. At number 6, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder. And assuming that the Thunder don't trade up, the question with them is, what do they do with this pick? And I think they're very likely to try to trade up for one of the stars of this draft, a guy like Evan Mobley or Jalen Green. But they have some talent on their roster. Obviously, this roster's not right because Al Horford's not on the Thunder anymore. But they have SGA, they have Kemba Walker, they have Pokashevsky, who showed flashes. Darius Bazley showed a lot of flashes. Even Ty Jerome showed flashes this year. Teo Maladone, Luguentz Dort, Moses Brown got traded. He's not there anymore. But they have some talented guys, a lot of talented young guards, I feel like. But looking at this, the guys who are still available at this point, I feel like it'd be a little bit of a stretch for the Thunder to go for somebody who's not a guard. A guy like Jalen Johnson, Corey Kispert, even Josh Giddey. I feel like it's just a little bit early for those guys to get picked. So for me personally, I think if you're the Thunder in this situation, you might go with best player available. This would not be an ideal situation for the Thunder at all. I think for the Thunder personally, they would be looking for a guy like Jonathan Kuminga to fall. He's a better fit, I think, for them. But they have a lot of young talent already. A guy like Jalen Suggs, I feel like could pair well next to SGA, just because SGA does have the ability to play the two. He's a good shooter. He's a talented all-around guy. And Suggs also, I think both of them can play off the ball at a pretty high level, and I think they can fit next to each other. And then that gives you the ability to bring Dort off the bench as super sub, even move him to the 3, play Poku at the 4. It gives them a lot of flexibility, I think, if they do that. And in this situation, with there being a lot of guards toward the top of the board, I think you pick best player available. And I do think the best player available at this point is probably Jalen Suggs. I think they could consider Mitchell or Bo Knight, but for me personally, I think Jalen Suggs would be the pick for the Thunder at number 6. At number 7, we have the Warriors, another team very interested to see what happens, because there's been a lot of rumors about them trading 7 and 14, as well as a combination of James Wiseman, Andrew Wiggins, things like that, and looking to pick up, for example, Miles Turner and Malcolm Brogdon, or try to pursue Bradley Beal, or things like that. And there are a ton of things that could happen in the next 24 hours that could really change up this draft a lot. But for me personally, I think the Warriors are going to, if they wind up sticking with this pick, and they wind up, assuming their roster stays the same, because I can't really speculate on what could happen. Looking at their roster currently, you have a guy in Clay who can play the 3. You have Wiggins who can play the 3. He could even play a small ball 4 or come off the bench. They have a lot of talent. Oubre is a free agent, but Wiseman I do think has potential. Draymond is obviously a solid all-around player as well. You have Poole who can come off the bench as a guard, as a scorer, but Poole can play the 2, especially if you're playing small. And for me personally, I think a perfect fit for the Warriors for their future as a point guard, because I don't think Jordan Poole will ever be a star. I think Jordan Poole can be a solid player, even a starter level player, and I think he already is a solid NBA player. But I think Davion Mitchell, being a Baylor fan, I watched so much Davion Mitchell this year. He is the best on-ball defender in this draft. He has the ability to shoot the ball at a high level off the dribble, off the catch. He finishes well at the rim. He's not a crazy athlete, but he does have the explosiveness and quick first step to get to the rim and get a bucket. He's a great shooter. I think he can learn a lot from Steph Curry and become really good at moving without the ball as well. But Phenomenal all-around player. I like Davion Mitchell. I think he's one of the more pro-ready guys in the league, or in this draft. I think he might be the most pro-ready guard besides Cade Cunningham in terms of his ability to come in and play at a high level. And I just think he's going to be an exceptional defender. He gives the Warriors more defense on the court, which is definitely going to be nice. I'm interested to see how Klay comes back, and I think he has the ability to play next to Steph. I think he can play off the bench. I think there are a lot of things you can do with a guy like Davion Mitchell, and I feel like he is probably the pick here for the Warriors. I'm very high on Davion Mitchell. I think he'll have a great NBA career, and I think the Warriors would be thrilled to get him for their future. At number 8, we have the Magic again. And like I was saying, I have heard rumors about James Bouknight to the Magic, and I really think I might be messing his name. If I am, I apologize. But I think at this point, he probably, assuming he falls to 8, becomes the pick for the Magic. Another young point guard or shooting guard prospect who you can play next to Markelle Fultz. You can play off the ball. You can play him next to Cole Anthony. He can come off the bench and become a scorer off the bench, which really might be his best role in the league because he is kind of an inconsistent player. So I think at this point, you probably draft him. He comes off the bench. He's kind of a high-volume scorer, probably not the most efficient player, but has the ability to hopefully develop into a starter caliber, high level NBA player at some point, and will have the ability to develop similar to Jonathan Kuminga and hopefully find that consistency and efficiency that you want to see out of a player over the next couple of years. And he's another young guy. I think he has the potential to have a lot of talent, become a very good NBA player, and I do think he would be the pick. And if the Magic get Kuminga and Bouknight, I think they would consider this draft a success, and I do think that they would pick him at 8 if he is available. Now, at number 9, we have the Kings, and the Kings, the thing about them is, again, you have question marks. Is Buddy Hield going to be traded? I've heard rumors about Buddy Hield for Kyle Kuzma, things like that. De'Aaron Fox is their franchise cornerstone. I'm higher on Marvin Bagley than a lot of people are. I really do think if he can stay healthy, he can figure it out and become a very solid NBA player. DeLon Wright's a solid backup guard. Harrison Barnes is one of the more underrated players in the league this year, even though he's getting paid a lot of money. Rashawn Holmes is a free agent. If they bring him back, he is going to be a really good centerpiece for them, just at that center position. He's an elite defensive center, great lob threat, really good player. He's a little bit undersized, just maybe a little bit, but rebounds the ball at a high level as well. Very good all-around player. I'm a big fan of Rashawn Holmes. I'd love to see the Mavericks target him this summer, so I'm interested to see what happens with him. But also Tyrese Halliburton coming off the bench, coming off injury, but I don't think it's any sort of significant injury. And for me personally, I think that they're not really targeting a guard at this point because you have a guy like De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton who are likely to be your backcourt of the future. And I think looking at the guys who are available right now, I'm going to make an interesting pick for the Kings. This is a guy who I'm higher on than a lot of people, and I think I could be wrong about him. But Corey Kispert is a guy who I think can come in and be a knockdown sharpshooter on the wing. I think he's a better pit defender than people give him credit for. I think he has sneaky athleticism. Obviously, I say that and he's white, like sneaky athleticism, sure, but he's actually a very nice athlete. Has the ability to get up and use his athleticism finishing at the rim. I think he's going to be a very talented all-around player. I think he's going to be a knockdown sharpshooter as well. And I know it's probably a little bit early for where a lot of people would think Kispert goes, but I do think at 9 there's a very good possibility the Kings pick Kispert because I think he can fit really nicely next to guys like De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton at the 3. So for me personally, I think Corey Kispert is a very, very quality pro-ready player who I think could fit well for the Kings at number 9. At number 10, you have the Grizzlies, and the Grizzlies have a lot of options, I think, because you have a lot of young talent on the Grizzlies. They just traded Valanciunas, and they got Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams. Steven Adams will likely stay. Bledsoe will be traded at some point for something else. I'm not even really considering himself part of the core because I'd be shocked if he's on the team by the start of the season. But that being said, you have guys, if you're the Grizzlies, like Ja Morant, obviously, who's your franchise cornerstone. Dillon Brooks, who really came on during the playoffs. Kyle Anderson's a high-quality player on both ends of the court. Jaren Jackson, besides his rebounding, is a really, really good all-around player as well. Brandon Clark is one of the more underrated guys in the league, I think. Grayson Allen's a good scorer off the bench. Desmond Bane's a knockdown shooter who can play on the wing. Steven Adams is going to be a great rebounder. Has shown signs of potentially developing a little bit of jumper. If he can expand his game a little bit, we'll see. But if that were to happen, that'd be interesting. Justice Winslow has not played in a while, but is a guy who I'm interested to see if he can come back healthy and contribute, because when he was on the Heat, he showed a lot of flashes of high-level ability as a secondary ball handler or wing guy, and I think he still has a lot of talent to play at that wing spot somewhere. So for me personally, I think if you are the Grizzlies, your best bet is to pick a shooting guard, because I think Dillon Brooks slots in really well at the small forward position. You have a guy in Ja Morant who can score the ball at a high level, but I think Keon Keon Johnson is a guy who I don't know a ton about as well. I'd be honest, I'd be lying if I said I watched a ton of Tennessee, but I've heard good things about him. Really athletic player. Interested to see if he can develop a jump shot consistently. If he can't find that jump shot, he might not be the pick here. But Josh Giddey's another guy who I think is he's more of a guard. Like, the question with Josh Giddey is, does he fit? Does he fit next to John Morant? I don't feel like either of these guys would fit incredibly well next to John Morant, but I think Keon Johnson is more of a raw prospect, has the ability, I think, to develop a little bit more. And so for me personally, I feel like he'd probably be the pick next to John Morant. Hope he can develop a little bit more of a consistent jump shot and a little bit more of a consistent offensive game. But if he can do that, he's very raw. He has a lot of talent. And I think he may come off the bench his first year in the league, but I think he can develop into a really solid NBA player. At number 11, we have the Charlotte Hornets, and the Hornets are another team who have a young roster with a lot of talent. You got LaMelo Ball and Tjayerrday, who both had great years. Gordon Hayward had a really nice bounce back year and can play at the 3 or the 4. Malik Monk's a good scorer off the bench. PJ Washington's another talented guy. Miles Bridges had a good year. Devontae Graham. I'm not sure if their contracts are actually over, but they got a lot of young talent on the Hornets. They very nearly made the playoffs this year. And looking at the Hornets, the thing is, they need a big. And there aren't a lot of good bigs in this draft, I don't feel like, outside of a guy like Evan Mobley. You're not looking at a ton of talented bigs because their best center is Cody Zeller, or I guess PJ Washington, but he's really small to play the center position. Bismack Biyombo, you know what you're getting from him, and it's really not much besides the ability to rebound and play a little bit of interior defense. So Alperen Sengun is a guy who I've seen mocked to the Hornets a few times, and I don't know a lot about him, to be completely honest. He's a European guy. They're saying he's not that great of a defender, doesn't have the length. So defensively, he might be a question mark, but he does have a high-level offensive game. He's a good rebounder. So I think at this point, he's the type of guy you pick. He's a little bit of a project, but I think he has the ability to come in and be a quality big man next to a guy like PJ Washington and hopefully develop into a better defender. And I think he's really their best option at this point because they don't have a lot of needs outside of that. I feel like their backcourt is pretty set for the future with guys like LaMelo, Tjayerrday, and Devontae Graham, and then wings like Malik Monk, Miles Bridges, Gordon Hayward, things like that. So I feel like their best pick at this point would be a guy like Alperen Sengun, who I'm definitely probably pronouncing his name wrong, but I think he probably is the best pick for them in this situation. Now, at number 12, you have the Spurs, who are likely going to be a bit of a rebuilding team. A lot of their talent is getting older, guys like DeMar DeRozan and Rudy Gay. They have a couple young, talented guys in DeJounte Murray, who's improving as an offensive player and is already an elite defensive wing or defensive guard who can guard basically 1 through 4 at a high level, or 1 through 3 at a high level for sure. Jakob Poeltl is one of the better underrated defensive players in the league. Devin Vassell showed flashes, especially on the defensive end as well. They're going to be a defensive-minded team. Keldon Johnson's also a really nice player on both ends of the court. Lonnie Walker has shown a little bit of flashes. And I think Franz Wagner would fit well for them because they could use a guy who can stretch the floor, shoot the ball at a high level at that small forward or power forward position. I do think that he probably would slide in at the power forward position. And then it says center is a high need for them, but I actually really am high on Jakob Poeltl. I think he can play the center position at a good level. If they can find a backup center or somebody else to play at that center position as well, that will help them. But I do think Franz Wagner is probably the best pick here for the Spurs because he has the ability to stretch the floor at a high level. He's a talented guy. He's a decent enough rebounder as well. Like what they're saying, he has really good athletic, a really good size of the wing. Not a great athlete, which he's not, but he has a pick and pop big man type of guy who can play at that power forward position, shoot off the wing, hopefully develop the ability to create his own shot a little bit. He can hopefully become a really solid NBA player and become a better version of his brother, who didn't really pan out in the NBA in terms of Mo Wagner, who really did not seem to ever find his footing. But hopefully Franz Wagner can perform at a better level and slot in at the power forward position effectively for the Spurs. Now, at number 13, you have the Pacers, who are another team just like the Warriors, who are very up in the air in terms of what they're going to do in this draft. There's a very good chance they could trade Miles Turner and Malcolm Brogdon, or one of the pair. But they have talent. Domantas Sabonis, Caris LeVert, TJ Warren returning off of injury, was really good in the bubble and then just didn't play all year, basically. Doug McDermott's a good shooter. TJ McConnell's a free agent this summer. I'm not actually sure if McDermott is or not. But looking at their team, I think there's a good chance they're going to need to find themselves another ball handler at some point, depending on what happens with Brogdon. And I think Sabonis can play the center position if they do wind up trading Miles Turner. And I don't see another really high level ball handler or another really high level center for them to draft anyway in this situation. So for me personally, looking at the guys who are still left on the board, I think Josh Giddey might be a good fit because he has the ability to play off the ball. I've heard a lot of comparisons from him to Lonzo Ball because he's a great, really good playmaker. He's got great size as well. Like they say, he's not super strong, explosive, or physical in terms of his ability to finish the basket, but I'm not entirely sure how good of a shooter is, but if he can become a solid shooter, he hopefully can play off the ball, can become a little bit more of a creator for guys like Sabonis and LeVert. LeVert is a very good secondary creator as well, and depending on if they keep Brogdon as well, I think they may not struggle too much for shot creation, but I think having a guy like Josh Giddey who can hopefully develop into a poor man's Lonzo Ball and become a good defender as well would be a good pick for them to bring off the bench, hopefully let him develop a little bit, as they probably won't be contenders or anything this year. Give him a little bit of time to develop, but hopefully can become a solid NBA player as well. And then for the final pick that I'm going to do in the lottery, we have the Golden State Warriors. And as much as I'd love to pick Jared Butler for the Warriors, a guy who I think the Warriors could really use at this point, assuming they pick a guy like Davion Mitchell, that really sets them up. I think in their backcourt, they have a ton of talent with Steph, Clay, Jordan Poole, Davion Mitchell, Wiggins, who is more of a small forward. He's more of a wing, but still, at that point, you're looking for a little bit more of a bigger presence. And for me personally, that does really lead you to probably picking one of Jalen Johnson or Usman Garuba. I'm higher on Moses Moody than I am on both of these guys. And I'll be honest, I don't know a lot about Usman Garuba at all. I'm not good at I haven't really been paying that much attention to overseas scouting this year, which is my fault. They say he's a good defender, and if that's the case, that's valuable. But I just don't think a guy who didn't score the ball much at all on the at an overseas level. But he is young. He has the ability to develop. I don't think he fits offense as a player for them very well, though. If he's not a good offensive player and he's already going to slot in to potentially having to play next to Draymond Green, who's already not a good scorer himself, it would limit their spacing to pick a guy like that. And I think Jalen Johnson is a talented young wing who has the capability to do a lot of things on both ends of the court. He's a really good athlete. He's got great size, and I'm interested to see how he develops. And I think he can become a good all around scorer. Watching Duke, he did at times struggle. I feel like this year Duke as a team struggled this year. His shooting does need to be improved, but where better to go to improve your shooting than a team coached by Steve Kerr, and with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson on that team? You got three of the greatest shooters of all time right there. And so for me personally, there's not a better situation for a guy like Jalen Johnson to come in and potentially be a really nice stretch four, become a wing who can come off the bench behind Wiggins, and hopefully learn and develop and become a really high level wing, either the 3 or the 4 for them in the future. So definitely interested to see what happens in this draft, but this is the lottery that I personally would go with right now. I think Cade Cunningham easily goes number 1. I think Evan Mobley goes 2. Scotty Barnes fits best for the Cavs, assuming they make no changes, at 3. Jalen Green at 4 to the Raptors fits for me because I think they're going to need somebody as a secondary ball handler to play next to Fred VanVleet, because I don't expect that Kyle Lowry will return. Kuminga at 5 to Orlando is a bit of a toss-up. They could always go the direction of a guy like Suggs or Mitchell, but I could see them going Kuminga to give themselves more wing talent, and then Suggs and Mitchell go right behind there. Then they pick up a guy like Boone Knight, who I know they're high on. Corey Kispert at 9 might be a little bit high, but I think he fits really well in the Kings as a stretch shooter, solid defender, solid attacking in the rim as well. Keon Johnson is another guy who I don't know a ton about. Him, Sengun, and Josh Giddey, I don't know a ton about because I just haven't watched them a lot. But that being said, I do think this is probably the way that I could see the draft, the lottery going based on teams' needs and what I've heard about players they're interested in. So yeah, let me know what y'all think of my mock draft of the lottery. We'll see how accurate it is come tomorrow, how many trades are made, what changes, all of that. And also make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already to help me push towards the 2,500 subscriber mark on the channel. I appreciate all the recent support, and I'll be back with more content very soon. I appreciate y'all. Peace.